Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hyfi Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. I am so excited that all of you are joining us for another week of Hyfi. And joining us today on the podcast, I have Kayla, and also joining us, we have special guest Jeremy Carroll.
Well, I don't know how special it is, but I'm grateful to be here, Isaac. Thank
we
you, man.
think it's special.
I'll add some post-production, audience applause for you, Jeremy. How's that sound?
That'll be great.
Confetti cannons, everything.
Nice.
Well, I'm super thankful that both of you are here. One thing that we are talking about, the thing that we are talking about this month is how we are all made for community. And I am so thankful that both of you are part of my community. And for your preschoolers, we are going to be talking about how God gives me friends with the big deal of hey, hi, hello. And kids, we are going to have the theme of get connected. And we are so excited because being connected, being part of a community is such a key part of what Hyfi is. When we talk about Hyfi, we talk about building relationships for the purpose of spreading the gospel, of making Jesus known to the people around us. And for you as leaders, you have this opportunity each and every week to be part of this community, to be friends with these little preschoolers, and to share Jesus with them. And that is so exciting that we all get to be a part of that. And part of building a community is getting to know the people around us. So we're going to start with a fun question today. So Kayla, Jeremy, the question for you. What type of friend were you as a kid? What were you what type of friend were you? I'll just leave it there.
Oh man, I want options. What are the options of the kind of friend I could be?
Can I get multiple choice?
Man, was I the snarky friend or the funny friend or the goofy friend? Well, I am more of an introvert by heart. I have my extroverted moments and tendencies, but I was definitely always more introverted as a kid. And so I was the friend who had one or two really close friends. Those were my people. Those were my friends. I had Jessica, who lived down the street, and we would go ride bikes together. And I had Colby, who lived around the corner, and we would sleep over at each other's houses on weekends. And so I feel like I was that loyal friend who I had a small circle of friends, but if you were in my circle, man, you were in my circle.
I love it. I love it. And that is very indicative of what kind of friend you are now. So I love that too. Jeremy, what about you?
I guess I just want to say ditto. I will say this as a child, elementary school, I just don't remember what kind of friend I was. Middle school, high school, I really just had there was just a couple of buddies of mine. Now, I will say this, and I hesitate to share because I don't want to pat myself on the back, but you asked the question. The best compliment I got was actually only about 2 or 3 years ago. He said, when I think about Jeremy from high school, there were no lines. You crossed all the lines. You were friends with jocks and athletes and jocks, athletes, musicians, ag people, car people. You were just friends with everybody, and you were really relatable to everybody, and you just got along with everybody. And that spoke a world to me because I was like, okay, so back then I probably didn't think about it all that much, but I didn't get real clicky with people, and I just tried to be whoever. I just tried to be with people and hang out, and so that was just a really good compliment. So I don't know, whatever label you put on that, that's I guess the kind of friend I was. I was available.
I love it, Jeremy. For sure. Having those friends, because I like to try a bunch of different things, so I definitely had some friends who love sports, but I also was in theater, so I love those theater people. And then I also would love to make potato guns, so the science club was also a good friend of mine. So yeah, so definitely can connect with that. I love it. Well, as we are talking about community, as we are talking about friendships from the earliest years all the way till now, it is so important to be surrounded by that community. Whether you're having a great time and you need someone to come and celebrate with you, or you're having a hard time and you need someone to grieve with you, to be there with you, or simply to pray with you when everything else feels helpless, it is so important to have that community around you. And this week we are talking about our main idea is I can pray for my friends. And this is such a great idea to start off with, such a great truth to start off with, because there are going to be times when we have friends and we want to be with them and we want to help them, but it is completely out of our power to help them. So what do we do? Are we a bad friend if we can't help them? Well, today's Bible story comes from Acts 12, and it all is all about Peter's friends and how they prayed for him, and how when Peter was thrown in prison, when he was thrown in jail for teaching the good news of Jesus, they didn't go into like a Bond movie and decide, hey, this is our prison break. This is how we're going to get him out. They didn't make that plan. They didn't go and appeal to everyone that they knew and say, hey, this is what we're going to do to get him out. No, they came into a room and they prayed. They prayed to God because it was only through God's power that they knew there was any chance of anything happening. There was only one chance of freedom for Peter, and that was through God's power. And it wasn't their power, but it was power through prayer. And that is what we are learning about this week, that when everything else feels helpless, when there is nothing else we can do in our own power, we can talk to God. And through his power, anything can happen. So Jeremy, I want to ask you, Peter's friends, they were feeling pretty helpless. And when they were helpless, they turned to God. So how can we support our friends when we feel helpless now?
So for about a year, I've been trying to figure out how to frame a blog post around this, because sometimes as a kids ministry leader, I think, man, how do we help our kids pray well when sometimes we don't know what to pray? And even for my own kids, I sometimes wonder, like I know very specific things, but I want to pray for them. And sometimes I just, as a kids ministry leader, even though I know a lot about the kids I serve, for my own kids, I know a lot about them, but sometimes I feel helpless. Like I don't know the right things to pray or good things to pray. And so I don't know that Peter's friends necessarily were praying for these things specifically. Paul probably hadn't written this part of the Bible just yet. Maybe he had. I'm a little fuzzy on my timeline. But when I feel helpless, one of the things I feel like I can always go to pray is pray for the fruit of the Spirit, because I think there is some things in the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5, that we just know that God wants for us as Christians. And so if I was one of Peter's friends here, I could have been praying for patience. I could have been praying for peace. And so you could just go down the list: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, gentleness. Like you can go down the list and just say, man, no matter what somebody's going through, there is something in the fruit of the Spirit that we can pray for their thing. And even if we don't know what that thing is, we can pray for that thing. And we can pray for them to be more loving or more joyful, or we can pray for them to have peace or patience or self-control. Pray for them to be kind in a situation that's hard. Maybe they're facing some adversity. And so that's kind of my go-to. If I don't know how to pray, I ask the Lord, help me pray through the fruit of the Spirit. What is needed that the Spirit of God needs to produce in this particular person's life through that circumstance that they're in?
I love that, Jeremy. In fact, I'm probably going to write that down. Actually, I am going to write that down because
he's going to steal it.
I'm going to steal it.
If you figure out how to write that blog post, you can write it. I can't figure out the right way to frame it, but I've been working on it because it's been on my heart for a while now.
No, well, I won't steal it for a blog post, I promise, but I am going to steal it for my life, because like a few weeks ago, like one of my best friends, he got in a car accident, had a concussion, had to go to the ER, and I felt so helpless in that moment, because I'm like, hey, do you want me to come mow your lawn? Like, I don't know what to do in that moment, because the only thing you can do with a concussion is sleep or just rest. So there wasn't a lot that I could do, but knowing what to pray is such a good starting point. And when it is maybe our friends who need that help, that is a great place to start. But also when the kids in our classroom, when the preschoolers in our rooms that we're teaching on a Sunday, when they are going through things, and sometimes we are going to feel helpless because we are only with them for a little time on a Sunday. We don't get to spend every day, and we don't get to run over all the time and just help them throughout the week. But we can pray because God is with them throughout the week. And that is such a good starting place to pray for them to have that love, joy, for them to have that peace in their life when they need it. I love that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think something that's really powerful as we talk about this particular session, that we brought from Acts, or we didn't bring, that we read about in Acts 12, was thinking about just that when we feel helpless, what do we do? And I think there's just a really powerful moment here in teaching preschoolers and teaching kids and preparing our own lives and hearts to lead this week, to just be reminded that it's not in our own power. And prayer is not something that we turn to when we have exhausted all other avenues. There is a both and. There is a, yes, I can walk with my brother or sister in pain in this, and I can show up and mow their lawn. I can show up and send them a DoorDash gift card, or like just doing things, not asking, but just doing it and letting them, use it to the way that they need it to be done. But I think there's a both and in that prayer is not the thing we go to when we've done everything else. But there is a surrender that has to happen in our own lives and hearts to know we are limited. Our God is not limited. And so I think there's some really cool things you see here when Peter is in prison and we see his friends praying for him, gathered together, going before the Father, knowing it is not in their own strength that Peter is going to be freed. It is only by the power of God that this is going to happen. And so I think just remembering that the power of prayer, and that, that is something that we and kids have access to at the tip of our tongues, to stop and pause and pray, I think is really helpful.
Thanks for that, Kayla. That is so, so true. So we're going to actually jump to the next part of this story, which is probably one of my favorite, just laughable moments in the Bible. And that is when Peter has been freed. God's freed Peter from prison. He walks, he knocks on the door where all of his friends are. And this girl named Rhoda, she is there. She answers the door, sees it's Peter, and is so surprised. She doesn't even let Peter into the door, doesn't even let Peter into the place where they all are. She goes and tells everyone and leaves Peter standing there just out and about. So Kayla, I want to ask you, have you ever felt surprised when God came through on a prayer, and how did that feel?
I have felt surprised when God came through on prayer, which just makes me feel like I'm just admitting my own lack of faith in the Lord, which is true. I can remember a distinct moment in high school. Jeremy was talking about high school, so I'm going to go back to high school. I had moved. I was living in Texas, and I was moving to Mississippi. And I moved to Mississippi, and the school system was not great. But everyone around us and around my family, talking to my parents, was saying, you don't need to go to this school system. You need to go to this one over here. It's going to be a better public school system for your daughter. There's just going to be more things that she can take advantage of, AP classes, those kinds of things. And so, but we kept running into opposition, and we were told again and again, there's no way this is going to happen. No one's ever been allowed to do what you are asking to do. It can't happen. And I just believed worst case scenario. It's not going to happen. There's no way. And my parents really led through that, through prayer, and just saying, we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to trust the Lord, but we're going to pray specifically that the Lord would answer this prayer. And he did. And I just remember being shocked and being like, really? Really, Lord? This is such a small detail of my life that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really, have a huge impact on the universe. But it just reminded me that God knows me. He cares about the tiny details of my life. And just that intimacy of experiencing the power of prayer and seeing the Lord answer in such a tangible way that he could have answered in a different way and I would have turned out just fine. But he chose to answer by providing this favor towards me that I was able to experience things I couldn't experience before. I was set on a path of joy and love for things that I got to continue to do that I wouldn't have had opportunity to elsewhere. And so it was just a reminder of just the way that the Lord cares for us in the little details and that he is listening, that he is present. So that was really impactful for me.
Thanks for sharing that, Kayla. Yeah, it is really cool to be able to look back. And I know one of the joys of my life is where I think I have this plan, and then I'm like, yes, this is the plan. And then God's like, yeah, here's the plan, but also here's this other plan. And when you look back at God's plan, you can see his power really persevering, really shining through that. And you can see that, hey, it wasn't actually my plan. It wasn't how I thought it was going to be. It wasn't even how I prayed for it to be, because I thought it was, if I prayed for this, it was going to be really good. But actually, God had a different and even more amazing plan in the long run. And it's really just cool to be able to look back at those moments and see how God has worked his power in our lives. And it was through that prayer. So very exciting. Well, everyone, I'm so glad that you have joined us as part of our community, as part of the Hyfi community this week on the podcast. We are praying for you, and we don't say that lightly. Every week we join as a team and we pray for the leaders who are using Hyfi, because we know that what you say, what you do, how you pray for the kids in your ministry impacts them, not just now, not just today, but with their relationship with God. And that is the most important thing that we can pray for in the long run. So thank you all so much for joining us. So until next week, we'll catch you next time.